And it's more fun to write music with other people because it's about connection. Music is all about connection. And I think if you can start off in the room being connected with another human being, creating something together, you're already off on the right foot. If we're out at the weekends in a nightclub or at a festival and we're all listening to the same track at the same time and there's 10,000 people or 5,000 people all in unity at the same time when the bass drops, it is a magnificent feeling of unity that brings everyone together. Everyone's a YouTuber, everyone's a DJ, everyone's a producer. It's like, and as a consequence, there's just so much shit out there, but you've just got to know how to filter it because there's still golden nuggets out there. You just got to know how to find them, I guess. People want new stuff all the time. Like let's swipe, right? What's next, you know? And that applies to music as well. But if you don't make music, you don't sit in a studio and spend, hours grinding, making this stuff, you don't actually realize what goes into it and how long it can take to actually make something special or to make something really, really quite nice.
People, we bring you our 20th podcast episode. It is with a man who has been making tunes that you might call special or quite nice for a very, very, very long time. He is an absolute pioneer of the game, yet he has only just dropped his debut solo album. We are talking about none other than Ed Rush, and his album Light of the Void, released on Blackout, has essentially been 30 years in the making. I caught up with him around the week before it was released in late March 2024 to capture this unique moment in his career so far. As with all One More Thing podcast conversations, this interview goes all over the shop. In fact, we kick off with a little thank you on some parenting advice he gave me many years ago. My name is Dave Columbo Jenkins, and this is the One More Thing podcast. If you like what you hear, then please help us spread the word in any way you can, and maybe support us on Patreon if you are able to. But in the meantime, let's get back to man like Ed Rush. This one goes super deep. Get to know. Right, actually, do I introduce you? Do I call you Ben throughout? Because I know you as Ben, but you're always known as Ed Rush. Do you prefer to be called Ed in a professional capacity?
To be honest with you, I think I prefer Ben. Yeah. Because I know, like people that I don't know so well call me Ed, it's fine. But I know you quite well, Dave, so it's all good. I think I prefer Ben. I'm not really bothered. You call me Ed, that's fine. Call me Ben, whatever. I've been called many things in my life.
Probably worse.
Oh, many worse.
Brilliant. Ben, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. How are you doing, first of all?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I've been really busy, and I've been keeping myself busy. So I'm well. I'm good. Thanks, Dave. How are you, mate?
I'm not bad. I'm all the better for seeing you, because the last time I saw you, the last time we were in the same place at the same time, was backstage at a festival in Prague. Probably it would have been about 5 or 6 years ago now, and we had a conversation that literally changed my life. And I like to start all of these podcast interviews with a little kind of personal thing, or tapping into an old interview that we've done, or finding an old quote or something to kind of just flex a little bit and show that I've known the person that I've been interviewing longer than the interview and stuff. But with this particular instance, the last conversation that we had face to face, mano a mano, you changed the way I parent and everything. I don't even know if you can remember that conversation. Does this ring any bells?
Wow, Dave, that's a statement and a half, man. I remember seeing you, yeah, of course, but I don't remember any specifics about any conversation we might have had, to be honest.
It was all about swearing with kids and letting your kids swear. And I was at a crossroads in my life at that stage. I was biting my tongue, and I was trying not to swear, and I was trying to be that good, God-fearing dad and not swear. And it was really doing my head in, because I was having to change my language. I was having to change who I was. I wasn't being my authentic version of me in front of my kids. And so I had started to swear a bit. And this has turned into a really responsible, mature approach to parenting as a sweary parent, and letting my kids swear as well, but within certain rules. I don't just let them tell me to fuck off or something. They've got to be clever with it. They've got to be intelligent with it, but use it as we use it with adults. But you were the person, I don't even know how it came up, but you gave me the green light, and the relationship and the rapport and the banter that I have with my kids is top notch. And I put a lot of that down to treating them like adults, giving them respect, letting them swear as and when is appropriate. I'm feeling free to do so myself, because it stops you from biting your tongue unnecessarily. You can articulate yourself better. And yeah, you gave me the green light. You literally changed my life. How do you feel about that?
Oh, mate, that's amazing, man. I'm pleased that I was able to have some kind of positive effect for you, man. That's amazing. Yeah, I think it's all about balance, man. It's all about, like, kids, I think they should feel free to express themselves. But like you said, it's all about context.
Yeah.
If it's banter and if it's like lighthearted and it's said as like a jovial joust, then I think it's all good and it can be positive, and in a way it can lead to a deeper connection. But I think if it's been used in a negative way and it's just been like derogatory and being used to make people literally feel like shit, then it's not good, and we need to address that.
Definitely.
But yeah, I think people should be open to express themselves however they want.
Yeah, massively. And it helps to open up a whole other conversation that you wouldn't normally have about, like, the nuances of language and how to use it. And to be able to treat your kids like adults in any type of way empowers them and helps them understand things a lot more. It just makes a relationship a little bit better, really, doesn't it? I prefer talking to adults. Like, generally speaking, as much as I am a proud dad, I don't really like other people's kids. I don't like kids in general. So I've been looking forward to the point where I can have, like, funny jokes and be intelligent with my kids, because that's way better than listening to a stroppy child or anything like that, or another tantrum or something, really.
Yeah. It's all about them just understanding that, they're open to express themselves, and they should feel free to express themselves how they want. But there's a line somewhere. Like, if you're talking to a teacher or a policeman or someone of authority, let's be smart about it. Let's play the game of life here, and let's not tread on people's toes and get ourselves, like, in trouble and stuff. But you should be free to express yourself however you want.
Yeah, definitely. And
within the realms of decency.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we say. We say this all of the time. It's like, don't say those words outside of this living room, or in front of your teacher, or in front of Nana, or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
But when it comes to expression, I mean, we're not here to do a fathering or a parenting podcast or anything like that. We're talking about your music and your expressions and the amazing journey that you've been on over the last 30 plus years. Like, you, and I mean, I'd say your music quite often makes me swear in a completely different way. You've been on a trip, especially recently, to be releasing your debut solo album now after so many years. That must be a bonkers experience to go through before we go into any kind of aspect.
It's crazy.
Of your journey. Just where you're at now and where you have been the last couple of years must be wild.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of backwards. Most people do their solo stuff first and then collaborate later on down the line. They kind of establish themselves. And I guess in the early 90s with the early No U-Turn stuff, I was kind of doing lots of that stuff. I was solo. It's just me and Nico, and then obviously I met up with Optical and more recently Audio, been collaborating with him. So yeah, it's been kind of backwards putting this solo thing out as like the most recent project of mine. But I feel like maybe it's, everything happens for a reason, and the timing of it might seem a bit weird. And yeah, it's been 30 years, but I guess it's kind of taken me that long to get to a spot where I kind of feel that I want to do this stuff on my own, because it's a lot of fun collaborating. It's a lot more fun than being sat on your own in a studio all, 24/7. They both have their pros and cons. But I don't think I was ever in a place where I wanted to sit for this amount of time on my own and grind this hard. But yeah, now I feel like, you know, it's time to do so, and the timing feels good.
Oh, brilliant. It has really been a social experience for you. The whole creative process has always been social for you, really, hasn't it, in that way? So that must be quite scary at points. When you first started spending a lot more time on your own in the studio, must have been quite terrifying, thrilling, daunting, all at once.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it came about during the pandemic, really. It was a time where people were kind of forced indoors and people were forced to be isolated. You know, you just had your immediate family around you. And during that time, you know, it was, for most people, for everyone, pretty much, it was a horrible experience, because it's such a inhumane thing for people to be locked in their houses, because we're obviously social animals. We need this social connection and stuff in order to feel healthy mentally and all sorts. So it was kind of a weird time for everyone, but to be thrown as a creative and to be thrown into that space, it literally just crushed my world. Like I really struggled with kind of, you know, identity and purpose and that whole thing, because my whole career, I haven't really had any time to stop and reflect. It's just been go since the late 90s, really. It's the early 2000s. You know, I hit the ground running and haven't really had time to stop and reflect and look back. It's just been one project onto the next show, onto the next gig. And so to have all that time to just sit on your own and actually look back and think, well, what is the purpose and what is this all about? And, you know, when it's all said and done and I look back, what are going to be the most important things? And I think during that time I realized, you know, I was forced to kind of be on my own in the studio, and it was like, well, we might as well just get on with it, because it was my only real outlet of being creative. And because there was no shows at the weekend to make tracks for, also the kind of tracks I was making were slightly different for what I normally would be, more emotive. And this is why we see things like scope and stuff on the album, like the full vocal thing. I've never really done anything like that before. But during the pandemic, I was like, hey, why not? I mean, I'm probably not going to play this out at the weekend. God knows when the next weekend's going to come anyway with shows. So why not try something different? And I think off the back of that, there was quite a few tracks, initial ideas that got sparked during that period, that were very different from what I would have done had I not been in that situation.
Yeah, completely. Because you're out of the, you know, anything that you make hasn't got the usual function that you would be normally applying it for, which is the dance floor and touring. And in your position as well, playing very like late night headline slots, you're known for properly slamming it out. So a lot of those kind of tracks that you'd be making, just they didn't have a function at all, really. And I've spoken to a lot of artists like about that kind of era. I think it was harder for touring artists, like, you know, where you're out every weekend. This has been your life, like you said, your entire adult life, really. To have that taken away, I think it was impossible to find, or very, very, very challenging to find any type of inspiration, really. Like you said, you know, kind of finding your own identity again and wondering what you stand for if you're not on the road, which must be an incredibly, a really, really kind of scary experience, having that taken away from me.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, I'm blessed that I've got a beautiful family, and I was able to concentrate on that. And, you know, we were all together during that time, which obviously helped us all get through. But without them,
probably swearing as well. You're probably having a nice little swear as well, knowing you that.
Absolutely. Oh, there's lots of swearing going on for sure. So yeah, it was good. It was important to have that unit around me and have that, you know, that secure foundation. Yeah. Because I think if you're on your own going through that, it must have been absolutely brutal, like brutal. Because, you know, like it was hard for, especially in the music industry and within sort of the DJ community, there's quite a lot of egos. It's quite an ego-driven career if you think about it. Like, you know, you're standing up in front of thousands of people every weekend. You've got to be quite thick-skinned initially to want to do that. And I think, you know, it was quite testing, because all of a sudden that was stripped away from you, and there was no longer the weekend shows, and there was no longer that solidifying of your identity. And so you kind of had to find somewhere else find inspiration and somewhere else to find who you really are. And so it inspired me to start digging a bit deeper and doing a bit of self-work. And I ended up finding a whole new universe of stuff that I didn't even really realize existed before.
Wow.
Which has helped me moving forward from there. And I think everyone should at some point do a little bit of like inner work. I think it helps definitely, not just you, but everyone around you. You know, it has a domino effect.
So what type of inner work did you do, and what did you learn about yourself?
Mainly just like just spending a lot of time just kind of like I started doing meditation, doing like mindful stuff, and some of the early traditions. And you know, you start off with kind of just observing your breath and concentrating on because you know we spend most of our lives lost in thought, basically running around in our own heads with this little voice telling us we're not good enough, or that you know that you can't do this, or you shouldn't do that, or what if you do this and they say this, or what if they think that. And like it's a human condition. It's part of our survival system that keeps us alive, is this little voice in our head. But the problem is a lot of the time it's there when it doesn't need to be there, and it ends up telling us stuff that we don't need to hear, that doesn't actually serve us.
Man, it's like you can look into my mind. You're literally diagnosing how I am all of the time.
Right. So there's these techniques you can use where you can spot that, and you can see that, and you can be aware of it. And rather than it running you, and rather than it being like a horrible flatmate who's constantly judging you and telling you that you can't do this and you can't do that, following you from every room, from one room to another, you can actually observe it and look at it and realize that it's not you, that it's something, it's your mind that's creating these concepts and these dynamics and stuff, and that the real you lies beyond that, and you're creating this. You are the one that's creating that. And through these techniques and stuff, you're just able to observe that. You're just able to see the separation between mind and yourself, and it just gives you a tiny little bit of space. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden you can walk around and everything's fine. Like, you still get the voice, you still hear it, it's still there, but you're just able to process it in a slightly different way, rather than it feel like it's a backpack that you're wearing it and it's kind of on top of you all the time. You have this separation from it, and you're able to kind of look at it as an object rather than it being something that's kind of like possessing you in a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Brilliant. How long did it take you to go on that journey to get to a point where you were able to, literally kind of change your thoughts in that type of way, or control your thoughts, maybe is a better word? Yeah,
it's more like you don't really control them. It's more like they still, you can't stop them arising. Like, you're constantly getting bombarded with mind. It's constantly there, and it's there literally to keep you alive, which is good. But the problem is the way that it works now in modern society. We don't need it to keep us alive because we're quite safe in our little houses and all that kind of stuff. We don't have to worry about the lion coming to eat us anymore in the jungle. So you're just able to, rather than like stop those thoughts, you're just able to look at them as objects. You objectify them. And when you objectify them, they kind of lose their power. They become less poignant. They have less dominance over your everyday life. And when I started doing it, I guess I noticed a difference within a week. Within sort of 7-10 days, I could start to feel a bit more confidence in the fact that these thoughts are kind of, you basically start to learn that this is a human condition. Everyone has it. Your brain does this to you. It's not you that's special, that's having this anxiety or these thoughts. Everyone has it. It's just your capability of dealing with it. So you're just giving yourself a bit of a leg up on the ladder. You're just giving yourself a bit more of a chance to deal with this bombardment of negative thoughts that we constantly have. So yeah, I'd say after probably about 2 months of doing it, you start to actually notice quite a decent change. And then you kind of hit this period where you're sort of in limbo for a while, but you kind of like, you understand because it's hard, because you kind of, in order to understand it, you have to use your mind. You have to intellectualize it to make it a concept to kind of understand it. But in order for it to really have its effect, you have to drop mind. It's before mind. So the more you do it, the easier it becomes, basically. But 10 minutes a day for 2 weeks, and I promise you, you will notice a difference.
Is this the second time you're changing my life away from music again? We've already got the intro to the next podcast sorted then, when I become this meditation. And I've never thought,
I don't know.
I've always said, and I've always felt that I haven't got the concentration span for meditation. So I found mindfulness in exercise. And that was my big kind of revelation, was finding it in exercise, because just being able to sit there and kind of analyze my thoughts, I feel, and I've assumed that I would just get myself into even more of a tangle, and I'd just be getting up and I'd be doing all of the kind of attention stuff, things that I tend to do in life. And just the idea of meditation, even though we'll quite happily sit down and listen to a piece of music for 10 minutes or much longer and be completely inside that piece of music, just listening to my own brain for 10 minutes seems counterintuitive. But perhaps that's a case of like facing your own thoughts and how you work. And that's the first start in being able to develop those tools.
Yeah, I think physical exercise is really closely tied into all this, because it releases endorphins and makes you feel good and like lifts your spirit. Literally, physical exercise is proven obviously to be really good for us, and it goes hand in hand, body and mind. If you look after mind, body follows, and the other way around. If you start going to the gym and it becomes part of your routine, as part of a domino effect, you're like, well, maybe I shouldn't eat that extra donut, and maybe I shouldn't have that extra packet of crisps, because I've got to go to the gym later. And it starts to affect your everyday life. It has a knock-on effect. And I think if you start doing this, some of this mindfulness stuff as well, it has a similar effect. It starts to come up in your everyday life. It starts to affect certain decisions and stuff that you make. But yeah, I think physical exercise is definitely, if you do physical exercise alongside with this, I think you're giving yourself the best shot to live a healthy and happy life. But yeah, music, like you said, is medicinal, and it can get you into a state of meditation. And very often, a lot of these meditation techniques actually require certain frequencies to get you into a certain state, because they have these certain, like these delta waves and these certain waves, and they actually exist on certain frequencies, 32 hertz around this area.
Wow.
Yeah, and they're showing now that these certain frequencies can actually help you get into certain mind states and stuff. So it's all interesting, man. Once you open this door, it's like a rabbit hole.
Yeah, a really fascinating rabbit hole that isn't too far away from the rabbit hole that you've always been exploring then, in terms of frequencies. And I've interviewed Ria, who's a sound therapist and does sound baths, and we've covered this in the podcast series.
Cool.
I don't know, it was about 8 months before. She only hinted at it, but when she's talked about frequencies, that blows my mind. And she's the only person who's talked to me about it. When you first came into that as a sound man, as an engineer, as a person who's dedicated his life to being right at the frontier of electronic music and production dynamics, like one of the top tier, did that blow your mind? Did that suddenly make you start thinking, oh, can I incorporate this into my music somehow? Or did you keep it very, very separately? And when you're talking about delta waves in terms of self-healing and self-work, does that not even come into the Ed Rush side of your life in that type of way?
No, it hasn't done yet, because obviously, like, they're very different. The kind of music I'm known for and the kind of music I make is energetic, upfront, aggressive, in your face kind of style. And the other side of it, like the healing side, is the polar opposite. It's calming and relaxing and supposed to create space and make you, chill out a bit. So I think if I was making different music, maybe it could be incorporated in a certain way. I wouldn't be surprised if artists like Fred again are aware of this kind of stuff, and he's incorporating it into his stuff, because I definitely feel some kind of like vibe, that kind of vibe off his music. that's definitely some frequencies that he understands, that because his music is medicinal, isn't it? I mean, you listen to that and I just want to chill out. It's beautiful. So I definitely think, like, genre-wise, if I was doing something else like deep house, maybe you could incorporate it somehow into that. It would be cool, you know. But I think with like neuro drum and bass, it's going to be hard to try and.
Extreme.
But it's definitely, yeah. But it definitely got me thinking. Like, it definitely got me thinking as far as like, it's proving more and more that frequencies affect us as humans in ways that we don't fully understand yet. I mean, like, you know, we all go and if we're out at the weekends in a nightclub or at a festival and we're all listening to the same track at the same time, and there's 10,000 people or 5,000 people all in unity at the same time when the bass drops, it is a magnificent feeling of unity that brings everyone together. And the only thing that's doing that is frequency. It's literally sound waves traveling through the air that's bringing that moment for everyone to feel connected, which is magical.
It is. It really is.
So in a way, it got me thinking more like that. Like, maybe there's more to this stuff. Like, there's certain frequencies that can heal. Like, there's some stuff I was reading about a few weeks ago. Like, there's this team that are doing cancer research, and they found this certain frequency that just kills leukemia cells. So you have these cancer cells, and you zap them with a sound wave, and they die. So there's no chemo, there's no intrusive stuff, there's no like killing out all the healthy cells around it, which is the approach we use now. You can very accurately aim a sound wave at these cells, and they just die. So I mean, that in itself it just blew my mind. The fact that literally we can heal ourselves with sound.
That's amazing, isn't it? That's absolutely bonkers and beautiful. And there is so much that we don't know about the human condition or the world condition, light frequencies and their effect on us and stuff. I mean, like, the thing that always blows my mind, going off piste a little bit, but with like cancer treatment, is the way that certain animals can be trained to detect it. Just by, you know, I don't know, they'd be smelling it, they'd be using all of their senses in an animalistic way, which is far beyond us mere humans. But they can, you know, if a dog is able to detect it, then, and frequencies are able to kill certain cells, we've still got so much more we need to learn about existence.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I think all the answers are out there in nature. Everything that we're looking for in modern medicine, I think nature has an answer for it. We just haven't discovered it yet.
Definitely. And back onto your music and on frequencies as well. When you described your music just now as being very aggressive and in your face and stuff like that, what I've always found with artists, the harder the music they make, or the more aggressive and the more uncompromised the music they make, the more chilled out they seem to be in actual real life. Like, you know, when you meet any heavy metal bands or anything like that, most people right at the top of their game in neuro and stuff, you don't meet that many aggressive kind of people. Like, almost like there's a catharsism of making this type of extreme music comes out then in your kind of natural persona, because you've expelled some of the demons that you've had in you musically in that type of way. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, or absolutely. It's interesting. Or it could be that maybe those people aren't that way inclined. Maybe those people don't have that side to them, and this is their way of expressing it. I mean, I'm sure it's different on a person-to-person basis, but I definitely find for me it's definitely a venting process. It's a way of getting emotion out, and it's a way of getting frustration out, and yeah, I think it's a really healthy way of expressing that. So it doesn't surprise me that you say that a lot of artists that make really aggressive music are actually quite chilled out, because I think it's a way of them expressing that. It's a way of them bringing that side of themselves into the world.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, is that why a lot of Light in the Void is still, even though it was kind of made or inspired by the time that you had in the studio going solo and, you know, kind of being on lockdown, is that why a lot of the album is still pretty hard and uncompromising, even though a lot of it might have started outside of the club for that same reason? Then that kind of that anger at the situation that we were all in.
Yeah, absolutely. It was pent up frustration from the situation, and you could see what was going on. It was ridiculous. People being asked to do the most ridiculous things, inhumane things, staying indoors and not going to, people not being able to go and see their loved ones in hospital and all kinds of things that we shouldn't be going through as humans. It's just inhumane. So I think it was a way of, venting some of that and getting some of that stuff out, definitely. But a lot of the ideas were written in the pandemic and then got finished off when things started to come around again. Because, once you get back into the routine of like being on the road again, playing things out, then you reconnect with that side of yourself, and you're like, okay, this is working in the clubs now. This energy seems to be more hot than this. And so then I could kind of redirect those initial ideas into what they are now.
So you could test them out and stuff like that. And also, kind of coming out of lockdown, it seems like Virus has had a real kind of reboost, and with the huge shows that you've been doing in drum sheds and stuff like that. Oh no, it's not. It's not drum sheds. It's the 20-year shows.
Steelyard.
That's it. The massive shows that you've been doing and the tours, and like looking back over the legacy of Virus. You had a space and a big audience in these venues to test these tracks out in as well. Like, that the coming out and coming into that, it certainly felt like there was like a new wave of energy behind everything that you and Matt were doing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the timing was like, as we were coming out of the pandemic, we were just hitting 25 years of the label being launched, which kind of prompted the idea to do the shows. And also there wasn't that much neuro in London when we started doing those shows, and there still isn't. Like, it's not massively popular in London at the moment. And we thought, why not? People aren't really putting their balls on the line and taking the risk and doing these neuro shows. Like, there's definitely a gap in the market. Why don't we give it a whirl and see what happens? And the response was really good. And it meant, we could get our friends involved, and a lot of the neuro guys that aren't getting that many shows in the UK, we could start booking those and flying our friends over from Europe and stuff. So yeah, it was really nice to have that platform to kind of not only test the tracks out, but to also kind of try and give neuro a bit of a kickstart in London again.
It does feel like it's had a good kickstart, like from there's what you guys have been doing, and then like younger kind of new generation organizations like Neuroheads and people like that. There seems to be this kind of newfound renaissance. I mean, you and I know that it's never gone anywhere, but these things kind of come in phases in terms of like where the crowd are going and what promoters want to book and stuff like that. It definitely feels like we've come back round on the cycle again, really, in terms of how exciting it is, or how many people, or how much interest there is in it at the moment. Yeah, definitely. It's like you said, it never really goes anywhere. It's just kind of, it fluctuates in popularity. But yeah, I mean, that side of D&B, it's like it will always have a special place in my heart, because it's got the highest energy for me. It's like there's nothing else in the world quite like it. There really isn't. So yeah, it's nice to see the younger generation embracing it again. Like you say, these Neuroheads guys, like we're doing a show in Bristol coming up pretty soon. So it's nice to see it being celebrated again in the UK for sure, man. I mean, like as you're well aware, you've been in the scene a long time, like I have. This whole thing's cyclical. It all goes round. Jump Up's hot, and then rollers are hot, and then Neuro's hot, and it's like it's always changing. But that's what keeps it interesting. The fact that it's always moving, it's ever changing. It embraces technology like no other genre. Like we embrace the new VSTs, and as the processing power improves in computer chips and stuff, like it's the neuro guys and the drum and bass guys that are pushing it always to its limits. And that's what I love about it. That's what I love about it. And also that the community's really, I think the community's really open as well. Like when I speak to other producers, people don't really like gatekeep their information and stuff. There's lots of sharing of techniques and lots of sharing of like how people are doing this with their snares and what are they putting on here. And like,
I think other genres, people are they safeguard and they keep their own techniques to themselves. It's a bit like us versus them. But I do feel in the D&B community, there's, if I'm doing better, it means everyone else is doing better.
Yeah.
That mentality is it's just beautiful. I love it.
Would you say that that's become much, much more of a predominant characteristic of drum and bass in more recent times? Like when you first came through, it did seem like everybody kept their ideas and their techniques and stuff very close to their test. And there's the classic line about it kind of being like an arms race, really, whenever new machines came out. And then I think over the generations, it's changed now in the newer generations now. And because of the internet, I think as well, and lots of other factors, people are more happy to share than they once were, let's say, when you came through in the mid 90s.
100%. I think so, definitely. I mean, even with your own music, people were a lot more protective. Like there was the Bristol sound, there was the London sound, and then Dillinger's had his sound, and like there was all these powerhouses that were just creating these incredible tracks. But it was a bit like trading. You go down Music House and you'd let someone cut a plate and they'd let you cut one of theirs. It was a bit of a trade-off. But it was definitely a little bit more segregated as far as like people keeping their techniques and stuff. I think you're right. I think nowadays with genres being more like bled into each other, is a bit more of a blurred. EDM is like EDM now. It's like people like house and they like dubstep and they like drum and bass. I think years ago it was a bit more like we're drum and bass and we're dubstep, and it was like everyone was kind of into their own thing and that was part of your identity. But I think now the lines are a lot more blurred and people are just into good music in general. And I think off the back of that, it's led to this more open-minded approach to like sharing information. And, because we have a lot more information on hand now anyway with social media and the internet and stuff. Like I can jump on YouTube and get a basic idea of how to produce within 6 months of free videos that there are available now. And that wasn't available to me when I was up and coming. You had to have access to a studio and you had to be able to get hold of the equipment and you had to learn how to work it and all that kind of stuff. Or you had to go to college and learn how to do audio engineering or surround yourself with people that knew what they were doing and learn that way.
Yeah.
I think nowadays it's changed. It's changed massively. And as a consequence, the way that we share things and the things we're willing to share has changed along with it.
If anything, it's kind of gone flip side where I know quite a lot of artists are quite keen to get the real information out there because there's so many really rubbish tutorials out there.
Yeah.
Which are like disinformation, which are taking people down like the wrong creative paths altogether, really.
Yeah. You just got to know where to look. The information's out there. You just got to know where to source it. But you're absolutely right. There's a whole plethora of absolute bullshit out there now because everyone's just releasing everything. Everyone's a YouTuber, everyone's a DJ, everyone's a producer. It's like, and as a consequence, there's just so much shit out there, but you've just got to know how to filter it because there's still golden nuggets out there. You just got to know how to find them, I guess.
Definitely. And at any point, encourage that people don't just put out anything. You don't have to put out every single track you make. I don't have to put out every single article that I write or podcast that I make. It's got to be of a certain level, but just because you can put it out doesn't mean to say you should put it out sometimes. And that was something that has always appealed to me about drum and bass, going right back to the first time I fell in love with it, is that there would be these sought after dubs, that no one was rushing to release all this music. There'd be music you'd have to wait for years sometimes to get your own hands on. And that quality control was exercised in a very specific way, I think, in drum and bass, in that type of way. Like nobody rushed to get out anything. If you had something hot, keep it hot, keep it in your record box, keep it amongst 5 other DJs for 6 months or so before it starts going out on promo or release. And I think that was a really important aspect of the development of drum and bass, wasn't it?
Absolutely, because it created demand. People would hear it out at the weekends and the ravers would be like, God, I can't wait till this is out on vinyl, the record collectors. And then other DJs that didn't have it would hear it and be like, oh my God, I need this so badly. So it actually created this demand. Whereas, I don't want to sound like an old git, but a little bit nowadays, it's like you put a track out and then 2 weeks later, everyone's like, what's next? It's like, hold on a minute. It's only been out for 14 days. Can you at least let it have a little bit of a run before we're asking like what's next in the pipeline? But, it just goes along with everything. As everyone's attention span is changing and the way we consume music and the way that we live our lives, that's just part of the process. I think that's just part of, that's a consequence of the times that we live in. People want new stuff all the time. Like let's swipe, right? What's next? And that applies to music as well. Yeah. But if you don't make music, you don't sit in a studio and spend, hours grinding, making this stuff. You don't actually realize what goes into it and how long it can take to actually make something special or to make something really, really quite nice.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, so I think if people understood that, there might be a little bit less demanding on the amount of stuff. But look at Forever, for example. It's called Forever for a reason. I wrote the original version about 14, 15 years ago, and I never thought it was quite good enough to come out.
Wow.
And during the pandemic, I reloaded it up into my DAW and started messing around with it, and it's had about 15 different iterations of that track. And so when I've actually released the final version that got released, there were so many comments of like, oh, we've heard a different version. Yeah, there's been 15 different versions. And probably the original might find its way out into the universe at some point. I'm talking to the Blackout guys about that at the moment, how maybe we could get it out there.
Brilliant.
But yeah, it's an interesting process, and these things can take a long time to get right, I know as well, Noisia, sometimes they spend ages on a track. Like they would spend months and months and months getting a tune right. And I think sometimes you have to go through that process if you're creating art.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. You have to be totally happy with it. And I see some people, some like friends of mine, they're like, oh, it only took me 20 minutes to knock this up. And it's like, well, imagine if you spent 20 days on this track instead of 20 minutes, instead of just making a very functional banger, but going right in on every like microscopic detail. That's the level that we're talking about until, these are the levels of perfectionism we're talking about. When we're talking about you, when we're talking about anybody you've worked with, people like Audio, people like Optical and Noisia, this is the level. That's what's kept Nero in its own world. And, the technical side of drum and bass is that level of detail and that level of perfectionism, isn't it?
Yeah. I think it's quite healthy to get initial ideas laid down quite quickly, because then they're coming from like a really creative place and you keep the energy flowing. And it's like, let's get these ideas banged out, the rough idea of what the track is going to be. And then once you've done that, that's when the time consuming process then starts. Once you've got the initial idea fleshed out, then you put your nerd hat on and you get into like the processing side. And that's where it becomes really quite, a long process. Yeah. Or it can be. Sometimes these tracks, like some of the tracks I've written with Matt, like we'd do in like a few days, the whole thing from start to finish would get done. But back then it was very different because we didn't have a digital desk. So once you killed the faders on the mix, that was it. The mix was gone. So once you pull the faders down on the desk, there's no recall. Like that tune is done. Whatever's on the DAT is what it is. Whereas now we've got the luxury of being able to forever recall it. You can always pull up that extra version and tweak it and do this and do that. So it just opens the door to never-ending tweaking, which is great, but it can also be your worst nightmare.
Yeah. You need to know. You need to have a point where you can cut it off. And I think, whenever you talk about, kind of you and Matt making tracks, I always think of the interview that we did around the Drum and Bass Arena documentary, and you've said it in other interviews, when the context, the scenario of a lot of the music you were making just sounds like a real kind of classic London, like down a back street in Soho, like you could see, like, I don't know, I think it was brothels or strip clubs and stuff like that. Like, that's what I picture when I picture you two working together, the grubbiness of real inner city life, really. And in that context, because that's, you've told me about it in interviews and stuff like that, having that kind of, being in that moment, really, isn't it? I mean, this is the era that you're talking about when you had that mixing desk, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. We were in St. Anne's Court in Soho. Rob Playford had a room in one of these amazing studios. He was running Moving Shadow and recording with Goldie and stuff from this place. And it was basically a cupboard that he had that they would keep like the Hoover and stuff in. And they were like, oh, we've got a cupboard if you guys want to come and use it, because we were looking for a studio. And it was a tiny little room, and that's the room that we wrote Wormhole in.
Amazing.
So that was
written in a cupboard.
Yeah, it was literally a cupboard in Rob Playford's studio in Soho, and it was in St Anne's Court. So it was down one of those little alleyways in Soho. So there was like, you'd see prostitution and drug dealing. You'd like stick your head out the window, and there was always something going on down there, especially at the weekend. You know, middle of the night on a Friday or a Saturday. It was like there was always something going on. So just being around that kind of energy and being geographically in that area, there was something special about it. And also that building we were in, it turns out that it happens to be a building that the Beatles recorded in. David Bowie did the one of his massive albums there. Lou Reed, Walk on the Wild Side, I think was mixed there. So this building we happen to be in, if you look back at the musical history, there's so much incredible music written in this one building. There's something special about that part of the planet, I think. There's something special about that part of London. It just has some, I don't know what it is, there's some energy there that just seems to create incredible music.
So there's got to be a blue plaque on that building then, or is it turned? There is a blue plaque for you. There is not turned into student flats or some type of gentrified thing.
No, there's a blue plaque there saying that David Bowie recorded the was it the Ziggy Stardust thing he did, like one of those big albums he recorded there anyway. And I know the Beatles recorded some of their tracks there as well. So
that sense of legacy, to be part of that though, you know, to be part of using that building and part of that geographical location and creating, there's got to be something there, hasn't there? Like, you know, these kind of echoes of the past, and people would have walked in the same way that you had and come up with ideas. Like there's got to be some leftover energy lingering in those walls.
That's what I mean. And when we were there, we had no idea. This is only recently I found this out. I was reading some article about music written in the 70s, and they kept referring to this building in St Anne's Court. And I'm like, hold on a minute. That's the same place. So yeah, it turns out that it's that this one particular building in Soho has had so much music pass through it. There's got to be something going on there that we don't know about. It's crazy.
That's brilliant. What was that like at the time? Going back to the kind of idea of collaborations, I mean, you and Matt have been working together for a couple of years. Prior to that, obviously, you'd been schooled by Nico as well. It's like one of those just, you know, a real kind of forefathers of this sound and of this culture in terms of the amount of music that he touched or helped or released or people that he worked with. What was that vibe like in terms of like the buzz of collaborations and you and Matt just at the controls, at the helm of just something that's out of your control almost? You had a sound and it was almost like running away with you, really. You were just following the sound that was coming out of the machines that you had in a way, or the spirit of that building and that time in London and the time in drum and bass. But what was the kind of the buzz that you shared like in that type of collaborative way?
Yeah, I think it was just it was like a natural part of the process, because I'd obviously been making music with Nico for a while. Matt had been doing his own thing. We all kind of, there was a group of us that were kind of collectively meeting in a building in West London, on the Goldhawk Road. It was this storage unit place, and it was like Nico's, it was where No U-Turn was being run out of. And we used to all go there. We had a very basic setup there. It was like nothing special. But the main point of it was the vibe that was there. There was me, Nico, Trace would be there, Fierce would be there, Optical would stick his head around the door once in a while, Dom and Roland would show up. There was like Gunshot, who was there, was a No U-Turn artist from the early 90s back in the day. So there was a good collection of us, and there would always be someone up there. So you could just roll up there and someone would be up there making a tune, or within a few hours someone would turn up and make a tune. And it was just almost like it had like almost like a youth community vibe, but only for people that were really into making drum and bass. So it was like surrounding yourself with like-minded people that were really passionate about the same thing. And so I think collectively off the back of that, there's going to be some amazing stuff that happens, just because the amount of hours that were being put in and the enthusiasm that was being shared in the room and stuff. And Matt and I just hit it off. Like, we had very similar backgrounds. We had similar taste in like music we grew up listening to. And so, yeah, we kind of both shared the same vision of where we thought the music should be. Like, we loved drum and bass, but we felt it could be harder in a way. It was missing a bit of a gritty edge. And I think we started experimenting with that kind of side of things. And then we moved from the No U-Turn studio, and Matt and I had our own kind of setup somewhere. And off the back of that, we started making a load of tracks. We had a lot of stuff laying around. We started giving it out to labels like V and Prototype and Metalheads, and they were picking up on some of the tracks, hence the Kilimanjaro release that I had on Prototypes and the Locust track and what have you. But a lot of the tracks were the labels just weren't interested. It just wasn't fitting in with their style. So we were sat on all this music. We were like, well, let's just do it ourselves. We love it. And if we like it, then hopefully other people will like it. And off the back of that, that's how Virus was born. It was literally a platform for us to put our own music out.
Brilliant, but very experimental, and just kind of seeing it really, like feeling that it had potential, but not being able to kind of, I guess there's no possible way that you could have grasped the full potential of what that material would have had in the long run, really. At the time, you were just sucking it and see, really, in a way, and just testing out and seeing how it was going.
Yeah, we were just being selfish and making tracks that we wanted to hear, making stuff that we liked. And we were like, there's two of us in a room jumping around like lunatics, enjoying it. We're like, well, this is fun. Like, this is great fun. And I love it, even if no one else does. And we were just lucky that it happened to resonate with other people, and that other people enjoyed it as we did. So yeah, I think it was a lot of it was just right place at the right time, kind of making a sound that no one else had done, because no one was really making hard drum and bass back then, really. So yeah, there's a lot of that involved, but it's also, like I said, it was a collaborative, like the energy in that room was unbelievable. It was almost like I imagine that's what it must have been like to be in the Wu-Tang Clan. Like, it was just like a collection of people that all had the same vision, all wanted the same kind of sound, all loved the same kind of things, and all wanted to work hard.
Yeah.
And that was it. And I think if you put a room full of people like that, there can't help but be something good come out of it.
Yeah, just the amount of raw focus and ingenuity, and especially at that time where, I think when a lot of people get into like the creation of electronic music now, a lot of benchmarks have been set, a lot of precedents have been set, and reference points have been made. But back then you didn't have all of that. And when you list all of those people like Fierce, people like Trace, Dom and Roland, all kind of recognized as being well ahead of the curve. Like, there's some very, very inspired minds all fizzing off each other like atoms there. Like, all wonders of combinations could have, and did come from that time, really, didn't it? And that's the power of collective and collaborative energy right there, is the reason why you've always stayed within collaborations, I would imagine.
Yeah, it was part of my foundation, was literally coming up in a group. So having that mentality as like your launch pad was it. That, I think that's why it stayed with me, and why I've always lent towards that throughout the most of my production. And it's more fun to write music with other people, because it's about connection. Music is all about connection. And I think if you can start off in the room being connected with another human being, creating something together, you're already off on the right foot,
Yeah. At what point could you see the influence of what Virus were doing and what you and Matt were doing? At what point could you see that influence coming back to you in other people's music and in the way that things were going within drum and bass? Because when people look back at groundbreaking albums, Wormhole is most definitely there.
Thanks, Dave. I don't know, really. I guess it was like once we'd established Virus as a label, and once it was kind of concrete set into like part of the development or part of the evolution of the sound. I think once it got accepted, people were then starting to incorporate at least the ideas of it into their music. So it was probably like the early 2000s. You started hearing people kind of borrowing certain ideas or drum breaks or drum patterns that we were using. And I think nowadays we've seen artists still incorporate that sound. I think there's some kids who have kind of picked up that idea and run with it, you know, taking it to other levels from even what Matt and I did back in the day, which is really nice to see. I mean, I hear it. I'm not going to name any names, but I hear it a lot. I hear a lot of that virus kind of influence in modern day sound. And when I do, I love it. It makes me feel a little bit proud, but I also feel it's great to hear that other people get it.
Yeah, totally.
Like when I hear certain tracks, I'm like, okay, yeah, this guy, he understands that whole vibe and the mindset and the kind of the sonic palette that we were trying to get across, or the sonic palette we were trying to lose, like the textures of sound that we'd be drawn towards. I hear reminiscence of that nowadays in quite a few artists, and I love it. I think it's great.
That's brilliant. That is your legacy. That's your DNA as part of drum and bass in that way, really, isn't it?
Yeah. It's beautiful. It's like living on. It's like grabbing the torch and carrying it into the next generation.
Amazing. What else excites you about the new generation of drum and bass? So that constant evolution in that type of way.
Yeah, it's like I said earlier, it seems to be like the main genre that seems to like embrace technology. I mean, obviously they all do. Electronic music is electronic music, and as processing power improves, everyone improves. But I think as far as like actually pushing sonics and making the most ridiculous noises that a human being can create with a machine, I think the producers that are doing that the best, or the ones that are doing it, you know, in the best way are the D&B guys. It seems to attract those kind of people that are forward thinking, that want to push the tech, want to push the sound. And that's why I think it evolves, and it's always changing, and it's never boring.
Definitely. And you kept yourself inspired. This new chapter, going solo, is you keeping yourself excited in this and developing and evolving yourself really in that type of way, kind of mirroring the trajectory or the way that the genre has gone. This is your way of staying kind of developed and pushing yourself on your own boundaries. Yeah, absolutely. And like, I think also, you know, I think just staying hungry and wanting to always better yourself and wanting to learn. Like, I like learning. I found like when I was at school, I didn't like learning. When I was at school, I just wanted to like mess around and do what kids do. I mean, kids are kids, right? But as I found as I got older, I actually quite enjoy the process of learning. And in doing so, I'm quite all right with sitting down with a plugin for 2 days and trying to wrap my head around it and being an absolute noob for a while. Like, I quite enjoy that kind of starting off treading water and trying to figure out what I'm doing, and then learning how to swim in whatever scenario it is. Yeah. But it's doing it on your own terms, isn't it? It's learning on your own terms. When we're in school, we're like taught by the education, we're forced by the education system to follow certain learning ways, and that doesn't work for some people. Like you, I was like really bad in school and didn't want to be taught. I just didn't want to be taught in the way that teachers were teaching me. When you find your own way of learning and what suits you best, whether that's hands-on, whether that's trial and error, whether that's all these different ways of receiving information in your brain and storing it, you find the way that's better for you, and that's when you really start learning, isn't it?
Exactly. And I think, like, you know, being passionate about that, and actually like wanting to better yourself and wanting to learn these new techniques, and not just resting on what's happened in the past, and, you know, like just feeling like there's more to offer. Like, there's plenty of fuel left in the tank, so let's hit the gas while we still can. That's the vibe.
Oh, yeah. Go on. That's wicked. I would love to wrap up. The journalist in me there thinks that's the perfect quote to just wrap up. And on that inspiring note, but I need to know more. I wanted to know, because you work with some like incredibly talented people, Gareth Audio and Matt Optical. Which one of them did you send your solo stuff to first for some feedback? And was it scary because they know you so well and you've worked with them for so long and made amazing music? There must be different feedback and different. You're going to send something to Gareth, feedback on something different that you might do with Matt, I would imagine, because you've got very unique relationships with both of them. But who was the first to hear your solo stuff in terms within the context of this album?
Like, to be honest, I was sending both of them stuff at the same time, but on one or two occasions when I was like just like still wrapping up the mix of something or just getting it ready to play out, if it was more neuro banging Killbox style, I'd send it to Gareth and be like, can you just run this in your studio? I want to play it the weekend. Make sure that everything's sitting in the right place because my room's a bit shit. And he would like just run it through, be like, yeah, mate, you're good. And then if it was kind of more on kind of the nostalgic tip, I would send it to Matt and be like, are we in the right ballpark here? Are you feeling this or is it not? And he's like, yeah, dude, we're all good. So it kind of depended on what the style was.
Brilliant.
But I only have like a handful of people that I send my stuff out to get some proper feedback, because you need proper feedback. There's so many people that you send your stuff to and they go, yeah, man, it's great. And it's like, thanks, but that's not really helpful.
Yeah, it's not what I want
you to tell me it's shit. And I want you to tell me why it's shit and where I can improve it. And that's really helpful. So once you find a handful of producers that are, you know, they're kind, but they're honest. That's what you want.
You need to be, or otherwise you're just becoming a yes man in that type of way.
Exactly, Dave. And that doesn't help anyone.
No, it really doesn't. So are you that type of guy for other people? Do people send you music then? Are you the type of, right, okay, I really need some proper critical feedback here? Have you become that voice for other artists then in that type of way?
Yeah. I think it depends on the relationship you have with the artist. If you know them really well, I think you can be a little bit more honest and not worry about coming across like rude or too critical. But I think if it's a brand new artist or someone who's just sending you stuff for the first time, I think you just got to be smart with the language that you use and not come across as... But I think everyone as a producer, if you're spending hours and hours and hours sat in front of a computer, trying to make something, trying to create something, and you send it to someone, I think you owe it to them to at least be honest and be like, you know what, this is great, but have you thought about maybe improving this area or whatever it might be, you know? Yeah. So I think you've got to use your discretion, and it depends on who you're dealing with. But me personally, I know that it's really helpful to receive critical feedback. Yeah. So that's what I try and give.
Definitely. It's almost an insult if you spent so long on something and then you're somebody's agreed to give you feedback and then they just come back with, yeah, banging, mate. It's almost a bit, it's never meant as an insult. It's meant as a compliment, but it's almost a bit of an insult to not come back with some type of critique. But I think if somebody's getting sent Ed Rush tunes, and they're not in a position or haven't been, producing for so long. I guess you're sending it to people who've been in this game for as long as you have, or would know you on that level, or something like that. Really.
Yeah, you need to send to people that you think are gonna help you with the feedback, and not just be like, yeah, man, it's wicked. Like you need that. You need the honesty. Be brutal.
Yeah, always. So what comes next from you now? When you were saying like this is the thing that you hate, so be brutal myself. What is next?
Hey, thanks, Dave.
The thing that you hated.
It's not even out yet.
I'm over that now.
I've still actually got quite a few tunes because I wrote a lot of music to try and get this project together. And with it being on Blackout, it has to fit a certain mold and sound a certain way in order to fit in with their brand. So out of the collection of tunes that I wrote, we picked the best 13 that represent what I feel and what they feel is a fair balance of the Blackout brand sound plus me, my personal taste and what I like and what I've loved and what I've been known through throughout the years. So there's a few more kind of 98 style things on there, plus some upfront Euro bangers. There's like a nice balance. Okay. I do have a load of other stuff that isn't on the album. not because it's not good, but because it just didn't quite fit in with the project. So I do have some other stuff that I can follow up with in a few months' time when the album's done its thing. Maybe a release on Virus would be cool. An Ed Rush EP on Virus would be nice. Wow. But if I was to do that, it would have to be like that sound, but in like a modern way. Wow. So it would be Virus 98, but brushed up to date kind of thing.
Okay, so this is really interesting. That's really exciting to know that there's more solo material coming afterwards, and you haven't hit that kind of released that debut album, you know, or created that debut album, and now it's like, fuck, what do I do? You've still got a whole abundance of material to come after that. But also, like, understanding, like, your work with Blackout, you've been really sympathetic to them as a label because Blackout have a very specific sound. So you understand that working with them as a solo artist, you went in with that, not understanding that there's going to be certain tracks, no matter how good they are, just aren't going to be for that label, because Virus was such a specific sound as well. You could identify with Blackout and where they're coming from as a label with a very specific sound, a very specific extreme energy to their output, really. Like Blackout is full on or fuck off, really, isn't it? You don't get many kind of deep tracks, unless it's within the context, like Scope on the album, where, you know, that's within the context of the album and it's a deeper side to show scale. Blackout means full on Blackout material. So you knew that and respected that when you started working with Black Sun Empire, I'd imagine.
Absolutely. And I think also the same's to be said for them. Like, some of the stuff on this album is stuff that they wouldn't usually put out. So it's actually going to open up, you know, it's a slightly different sound palette for them as well. So I think there's been a little bit of compromising on both ends, but I think it's healthy for both parties. I don't think it's a bad thing for them to kind of maybe widen the scope of music that's being released a little bit. And I think it's good for me to have a release on Blackout, because it's obviously one of the most forefront Eurofunk labels that there is. And their output is incredible, and their nights are really good, and they have a good presence in the scene, and the guys are great. And so it just kind of made sense for me. Like, when they expressed some interest in the project, I was like, it feels right. It feels good. I've known the guys for many years, and yeah, I've always had a good relationship with them. So it kind of made sense. It was such a good team down there. They're incredible.
Oh, amazing. Amazing. That's really cool to hear. It's great to know that there's more stuff coming out and things like that. So it doesn't sound like this is the end of the relationship with Blackout either. This wasn't just for a one-off album.
No, hopefully I've not really discussed this with the guys yet. But hopefully it would be nice to almost have a remix project as well off this album. That would be awesome, because there's lots of artists I would like to give my stems to and see what they could do with it. It would be incredible. Very, very interesting for me to see, you know, people incorporate or interpret your work in a different way and express it their way. That would be very exciting for me. So hopefully that's something we could do as well in the future.
Wow, and that's a bit of an exclusive. You haven't even talked to them about it yet.
No, I'm going to be. That would be a good thing. I'd love that.
Brilliant. Ben, is there anything else the world needs to know about where Ed Rush is at? The album will probably be out for about 2 weeks when this podcast drops. Or around about that time, towards the end of March, early April. So is there anything else the world needs to know about where you're at personally, musically, or spiritually right now?
I think, just keep your eye on the Instagram. There's some announcements coming up soon, some more exciting stuff that I'm going to be sharing. There's some other projects in the pipeline as far as like production and all that stuff goes. But yeah, just stay safe, keep healthy, and keep your eyes on the prize. That's the main moral of the story.
Yeah, keep your eyes on the prize. We are all winning. Thank you so much, man. It's been amazing. It's been wicked.
Thanks, Dave. Love you, man. And I really appreciate what you do for the scene, man. I think it's incredible.
Oh, brilliant.
Big up.
Thank you, man. Cool.